Welcome to today's webinar. The topic of the webinar is checklists. Checklists, what is it and what isn't it? So what the checklists, what they are is a means to provide structure and control over the way a job gets processed from A to Z. Process obviously in Ucam. What it's not is a one button or fully automated CAM system. So while checklists can run functions on their own, it was never meant to be a tool to create a fully automated CAM system. It guides you from A to Z, but it doesn't do it on its own. So once that is clear, that it's definitely a great tool to use, even for experienced CAM engineers. Well, getting a job from A to Z is more than just running a sequence of Ucam functions. You also check drawings, you read email, maybe you look up information from a sim system. Ucam will not do those things for you, but it can remind you to do them, or it can give you a message, do this, do that. Now typically the sequence of events can be flexible, but it's important that all the steps are followed. So with checklists, actually make sure that you cannot skip a step or cannot leave out a step that's critical. And it does that even the day before you leave on vacation or on that Monday after the Super Bowl party, when maybe your head's not totally into it, but you still need to get the job done. How would you create checklists? You create them in two stages. First you define the steps, and you can think of the steps as each line of a checklist or each bullet of a checklist. And using the built-in editor, you combine the checklist functions together to create each line of the checklist. After you've created the different steps, you then build the actual checklist, and again using an editor built into Ucam, you combine those lines into a list. To run them, you first need to link the checklist to the job, and you can do that when you do a job new. In the parameters box that pops up, you can pick the checklist that you want to run from the drop-down that is labeled checklist. Or you can also link a checklist with job load checklist function. And to actually run it, you would be executing the function job run checklist. So even if you minimize the window or you close the window out, you can always go back by doing job run checklist. Now linking the checklist, why do I use this terminology, or why do you even see link checklist to job in the user interface? Well, actually when you choose a checklist, a local copy of the checklist that you created before is copied into your working directory. At that moment it stays with the job, so it's linked to the job, and that same file is actually also used to record the progress, and it stores also any information provided while you were running the function. And I will make that clear in a moment on how that will work. This mechanism also allows you to stop a checklist. I mean, you can go home for the day, pick up the job where you left off, or for a colleague to take over a job knowing exactly which steps were already done. So there's no need to leave post-it notes sticking to screens and all that kind of stuff. You can just if you choose the checklist, use it to the checklist, you can just leave it like that, and it will the next operator can pick it up where you left off. Now the user interface, you see an example of the user interface here on the right hand side. Now the user interface does take up room. You can minimize it until you're comfortable with it. You can obviously, just like any other window, you can put it wherever you like on the screen and then save the layout. But it does take up room, and it's certainly another incentive to talk about getting one of those widescreen monitors that are now really getting pretty inexpensive. So basically, I mean, even today, if you would be buying Ucam today, and you see the pre-installation checklist, you would see that we are actually now recommending the minimum resolution to be 1680 by 1050, and you can even go higher. I mean, I personally run it normally at 1920 by 1080, which is really a very nice resolution to work at. Okay, let's have a look at it. Let's switch over to Ucam. As I said, I'll show you the two ways to first I'm going to just load it up, run through one, just a quick example. Like if I do create a new job, and let's say that I call the job, I call it the job checklist, and the customer is webinar. Then you see here, checklist, I have the ability to click here, click on CAM, for example, as just to use that one. If I click OK, same typical messages, and there is your, immediately pops it up. Yeah. So let's just close this out for a moment. Let's show you the other way. If I do job load checklist, I can also pick it up from there. Then you would say link flow to the job. And at that moment it does not pop up automatic. You would then click on run checklist, and there it is. In the user interface, it shows you which checklist that you are actually looking at, the one that you want to run. Yeah. So here we are, CAM or webinar. The operator, you can customize that, of course. Now, how would you run it? These are the lines that I was talking about, or the steps, and I'll show you. Obviously, going to show you also how you make these. There's for some functions it makes sense to provide input. I happen to have all of the steps require input over here, but let me show you one. See the webinar, there's like one that has an input field and others that don't have an input field. So that's all during the setup you can figure it out. And the other thing is that for each of the steps you can leave memos in there, and that same field is also being used. Like if you, for example, if you have created an info or a sign-off function, then it will store that as well in the step memo. So how do you run it? Well, you would start by just clicking on do. In this particular one, this is just a sample that is being used by one of the customers, but it starts with a bunch of messages, and for example it says read email from sales. Now obviously there is no Ucam function that will read the email from sales, so that's why we're using the message mechanism. It says things like specific to this customer, sign off email, read and print customer documentation. If you would hit continue, it brings up the Smart Start automatically for you, and you could, for example, then bring in like a data set. Let's just quickly do that. This is one where I needed a wheel with extended Gerber, and quit that out. Okay, then it would say okay, rename the layers, for example, to the job name and extension. Set the layer parameters. So obviously you would, you know, that's basically you would go through the layers modify functionality. Yeah. Now I'm not going to do all of these. This is just a sample anyway. This also talked about setting copper layer and thickness, setting plot parameters. This particular customer has actually uses the board snapshot template to print out a plot sheet, and obviously that's why it says set plot parameters. So when they are doing the layers modify, they will also fill in the plot parameters, because that's what they will be using to control the plotter later on. All right, if I continue on, so you see I keep on getting messages. You see also that, for example, here is one where it says create the drill drawing if not supplied already, or complete it using templates. Now, before there was no drawing layer, so the function Ucam did create, the checklist did create a layer automatically, and you will see that it can create outline layers. You can, for example, select it now will tell you select and copy the outline from the drawing layer. It also tells you that the drawing layer is the active layer. You see how it put that in red, and so you can continue on. See, it switched it automatically to the outline layer. It's now in red. There's obviously nothing there. If I had copied the outline from the drawing layer, I would now have been able to say paste, and I would have had an outline. Yeah. So basically, that is the the way you would run it. Yeah. I can continue on, but basically, you get the idea as to how it run it. Now, let's say that this is the stage where you need to leave off. You gotta run. You gotta go home. You can just close this, and the next day, actually, you would save your job, obviously. The next day, you would come in. You'll open up your job, and after you open up your job, you would run the checklist, and there is where you left off. Yeah. If at this stage someone else would take over, then that other person would choose himself as the operator, and from now on, all of the rest of the steps will be linked to Stefan. Okay, so continue on, etc., etc. So let's close this out. Let's have a quick look as to how we would create these. The creation, like all the setups, they are under the setup menu, setup checklists, and I talked about having the defined steps and the build. Well, we'll first create the steps. So let's bring this one up. Now, how does that work? On the left-hand side, you basically have functions that are either Ucam functions, like for example, select all, or select open contour, things like that. But also, for example, there's one that's called message, and which allows you to enter your own strings, and you can go up to like 255 characters here. How would I create a new step? I would just say new, yeah. Then I can call it what I would like. Now you need to make sure you cannot have spaces here, so just instead of a space, use an underscore. Just convention doesn't allow for having spaces here. So string, this is a sample message, and this is the second line of the message. Now, so I would then add that as action. There's the action. It's the message. Will be there. Now, obviously, you need to give people the opportunity to read that message. So what you would do with messages is that you attach, or the next step would then be or the next action would be a wait function, yeah. And then you could maybe, I don't know, let's do activate the layer that's a plain one, things like that. So you would basically go on, you click, you save it, and then the next stage would be, and by the way, let me first show you, I've created already, like there's a whole bunch of steps already there, yeah. Again, this is just a specific example. You can name them what you like, and you can also, I mean, there is basically no limit to the creation of the number of steps either. So in the build, what you would do there is that if I would create a new one, let's create. Since I had this one from the last webinar, I'll just create basically another webinar. And I need to do it like this, create it first, and then with ads, I've named it like that. All right. So then I would pick up the steps. For example, I could take that new step in the webinar, yeah, new step in the checklist. Yeah. Now, a couple of options that you have is if you do not need the input box. Remember the input box, I'll bring it up. This input box I'm talking about. If I look at that other webinar checklist, you see that one isn't there. Well, the difference is that I have this editable on or off. Like if I don't need that, the input, then I would switch this off. And when I then add it, it will not show the input box. An input box is only relevant if, for example, you would, let's say that I have a step that's called like swell over here. Now that's a message solder mask maybe. Yeah, like in the create optimize action in here will have parameters in there. So it might make sense that you open that up for the operator to put in different values if you need to. So another thing what you can do, another switch over here is, for example, if you, let's say that you, let's take the verify DRC over here. If I want to make sure that that there's a step in there that you know, I want to have a sign off on. So did you fix the errors, yes or no? With a sign off, you can force the operator to basically say, yes, I did do that. Or an example that we had yesterday was, you know, like via plugs or 10 busters over here. So if that's not relevant to the job and you skip that step, well, maybe you would want to make a note in there, either in the info, or if it's a critical function, you could create it as a sign-off so that the operators are forced to put in a memo over here. Like, for example, I skipped it because there are no VS, or I don't need any VS via masks or so on. Another way to, like, if you need to have the same function twice in there, then you will notice that I selected that same new step in the checklist. If I try to add that, it will not do it because it's already there, but I can just rename it. And that way, that's how you can do the same function. Like, for example, a netlist compare. Yeah, a netlist compare, you may want to run that at the beginning, somewhere in the middle, somewhere at the before panelization. Well, you'd only have to create one step called netlist compare, but when you put it in the checklist in the actual list, you would there then basically you can then name it something different. Yeah. You can also provide messages. Basically, if the function ran successfully, you could encourage yourself and say success. Or if you also want to like make it very, very clear if there's a function that error out, for example, or like if you you know, if there would be a problem with the checklist itself, you could say error, yeah, any which way, anything you would like, you would then attach that to the checklist step, like for example like that. Yeah. So that's how you create them. Those are the different parameters. Yeah. So if I would now load the checklists, another webinar, link that over here. Now I can access it. If I run it like this, and obviously now my demo effect comes into play. So, but if I would if I load it back in after I restarted Ucam, then I will get the option to also look at that one. Now let's have a quick look here. To the parameters that you can set in the ucam.db. Ucam.db has some keywords. They all start with uChecklist, so you can filter for that. And a couple of different settings over here, like uChecklist.setup.directory. That is where your setups, your checklist would be stored. Yeah. So give it a logical name. I like all of my setup directories start with U, so I called mine uChecklist. If you want to provide a list of operators, just fill that in here. Yeah. Then You can also, if you want to tie the operator to, like for example, a login, what you can do, since then the way I would do it is basically, if this would be my ucam.db specifically for me, then I would log in, and it will only show Luke. I don't have another option. And on Stefan's system, he may put it as Stefan, and that is Marcelo might put it under Marcelo, so on. Yeah. So that's how you can use the operator field. Now, what I've also done, I don't really use the fixed operators and default operators. I do it via the operator fields, but you can also, out of the list, assign a default operator. That one will then show up. If you have multiple ones, that's the one that will show up as the default. Then let's look a little bit at the colors. The colors have to do with like this one over here, for example. See, this list hasn't been run yet, so the idle color. This is basically the idle color. It's not doing anything yet. I've set that one to blue, yeah, so that it's very visible. The default is yellow, which is not always very visible against that gray background. So that's why I changed it to blue. The busy one, I changed that one to that one was blue, so I had to change that to another color, and I chose dark orange. And you see how that looks over here. It looks like that. Did I change any other colors? Yeah, the done, I changed that from green to gray. So if I continue on, you see now this one's gray. You can leave the green in there. And the fill, I left that one to red. Yeah. Okay, so that's the settings in the ucam.db editor. Basically, and that's how you run. That's how you run checklists. Yeah. That's the live part of the demo. Obviously, I didn't run it all the way through, but you can. This particular checklist for this customer actually allows him to go totally from A to Z. It has all of the steps in there that they need to do. Yeah, like a lot of them are messages, but other things is where it already creates layers for them, and they just have to copy from one layer to another. Layers are named properly, things like that. Okay, so that was the demo part of the checklist. Let's go back over here. This actually, we already covered this. So the setup directory, the colors, the operators, those are the different ucam.db keys. Yeah. So as always, I'm very interested to hear what you think about checklists. If you're gonna use them, maybe you are using them already. If you do, then I would be interested to hear about it. Then obviously, if any of this information during the webinar that was presented to the webinar, if it raises more questions than it answers, please shoot me an email, give me a call. If you have suggestions for the use of the checklist or possible extensions, please let me know about that as well. And feel free to any kind of comments that you may have on the webinar, both the contents as well as how it was presented, things like that. I would love to hear about it. Another request that I have for you is that please do send me topics for future webinars. I do need topics, so please email me, call me, and let me know what you would like the next webinar, the topic for the next webinar. Yeah, actually, the next webinar will probably, since if you followed this one in sequence, the next one after this one will be the newer version. But I'm still open to other topics, so please send them to me. All right, thank you very much. That was today's webinar, and have a great day.